හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9 this Wednesday, the 31st of January 2024. American concerns. American ambassador to Sri Lanka chides Sri Lanka's refusal to adhere to international digital companies' concerns over the online safety bill. Sri Lanka Telecom divestiture. The Sri Lankan government shortlists 2 possible investors for the divestiture of Sri Lanka Telecom. Hope abounds. Minister of Sports and Tourism comments on both sports and tourism as he provides some hopeful news for the resurgence of cricket and football in the nation.
ක්‍රිකට් පරිපාලනයේ ඡන්ද කරන ක්‍රමය වෙනස් වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒ ෆුට්බෝල් ෆෙඩරේෂන් එක. ඒකේ ආසියානු සභාපතිතුමා අපිට ජාත්‍යන්තර ක්‍රීඩාංගණයට එතුමා මුල්ගල් තියන්නට පැමිණෙන්න සූදානමින් ඉන්නවා.
While concurrently welcoming its 201,000 tourists, indicating over 100% year-on-year growth from last year.
100%කින් වර්ධනයක් ගිය අවුරුද්දට වඩා මේ ජනවාරිය තුල ලැබිලා තියෙනවා.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, happy Wednesday and a warm welcome to this Wednesday's edition of AdaDerana's English News. First at 9, you're with Jonathan Benedict. Let's take a look at our news for the evening, starting with our top story right now. The resident US ambassador in Colombo, Julie Chung, observes that the online safety bill, which was recently passed without paying heed to the concerns of associated businesses and stakeholders, sends out a negative signal in Sri Lanka's endeavours towards reform and recovery. While highlighting that the Sri Lankan government has to do better while addressing an event in Colombo today, the US envoy said that the legislations and reforms have to be durable, enforceable and wise. The US ambassador also observed a resurgence of US investments into Sri Lanka, which can be observed, and added that it will lead towards the economic growth of the country.
The CXO Forum of the American Chamber of Commerce was held in Colombo today under the theme 75 Years and Beyond US-Sri Lankan Business Relations in 2024 under the patronage of US Ambassador in Colombo, Julie Chung.
We saw recently is the online safety bill. The Center for Policy Alternatives reported from a poll earlier this month that more than 70% of Sri Lankans were unaware of the bill before it passed. And when major global tech companies, including the Asia Internet Online Coalition, this Google, Meta, Facebook, all those companies characterized the bill as, quote, unworkable, unquote, and something that would stifle innovation and democracy instead of actually addressing online crimes, which they say it's intended to do. This sends a negative signal, frankly, in Sri Lanka's path towards reform and recovery. Previous bills we have seen, such as the Personal Data Protection Act, took much longer to craft, but did a better job of taking stakeholder feedback into account. And that doesn't mean a one-way monologue of the government to companies or civil society or lawyers groups. It means an actual exchange and listening and taking that input and integrating it into the law. Now, to work on legislation and reforms that would be durable, enforceable, and wise, the Sri Lankan government will need to do better in the future. And this will be key to improving the business climate. And businesses, of course, shouldn't just sit back and wait for the government to act. The private sector, all of you, have such an important role to play. Business leaders, all of you in this room, you are not only purveyors of goods and services and profit, you're also community thought leaders. We see a resurgence of U.S. investment interest in Sri Lanka. We also see some companies in Sri Lanka who are making investments in the United States. And we all know that trade and investment is a two-way street. So we believe that these investments in the U.S., if wisely made, will lead to economic growth both in Sri Lanka and in the United States. Even as we see a resurgence of interest in the two-way investment, we also see challenges ahead that will require leadership. Now, both our countries, United States and Sri Lanka, will have elections this year. We need to do all we can to stabilize the business environment As leaders, we need to think about both the medium and long term and how we need to create an environment that's conducive to trade, investment, and business expansion. One with transparent governance, where corruption is no longer tolerated. In the long term, we need to raise up a generation of leaders to take our place.
India's Minister of External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar, reiterated that the support rendered by India to Sri Lanka during the crisis was 50% greater in magnitude than what the International Monetary Fund is currently providing the island nation. Joining a discussion in Mumbai, the Indian External Affairs Minister urged Indians to visit Sri Lanka for holidays as Sri Lankans appraised the support rendered during the crisis period.
The next time you want to take a holiday, go to Sri Lanka. I'm serious. Please go to Sri Lanka, mix with the normal person in Sri Lanka and ask them, what do you think about India? And I can tell you, you will feel yourself grow with that answer. I have myself been in Colombo. There was a petrol shortage. People were pushing their cars to the petrol bunk to get petrol and fuel up. And there were queues of kilometers doing this. The country was running out of food. It couldn't get essential commodities. Now, at a time when the rest of the world turned its back on Sri Lanka, the only country which came forward, and came forward not in a small way, we actually committed $4.5 billion to Sri Lanka. And just to give you a reference point, they negotiated for a long time with IMF, which, by the way, should have been where the help should have come from. And that IMF package was less than $3 billion. So what we did immediately, quickly, efficiently was 50% bigger than what the IMF did. And no other country came close. China is also a neighboring country and in many ways will, as part of competitive politics, influence these countries. I don't think we should be scared of China. I think we should say, okay, global politics is a competitive game. You do your best, I will do my best.
Two companies from India and China have pre-qualified for the request for proposal stage of the divestment of the Sri Lanka telecom industry. According to the state-owned enterprise restructuring unit, the International Finance Corporation will act as a transaction advisor for the divestiture of shares in Sri Lanka Telecom.
The government of Sri Lanka previously called for proposals to select a suitable buyer for the sale of 50.23% of the shares held by the government in Sri Lanka Telecom. Accordingly, India's Jio platform company, China's Gochuyun International Investment Holdings Company and Portugal's Pettigo Comércio International Company of UK's Lanka Group had presented themselves as candidates via an expression of interest. Accordingly, the Cabinet-appointed Special Project Committee and the Special Cabinet-appointed Negotiating Committee have selected the Jio Platform Company and China's Gochuyun International Investment Holdings Company as pre-qualified competing companies for the purchase of the telco. Jio Platform Company belongs to Reliance Industries Limited Groups, owned by Indian billionaire businessman Mukesh Ambani. The other qualified company, Gochuyun International Investment Holdings, is a venture capital and asset management company established in 2016 in China.
අපි කතා කරනවා නම් ඩිජිටල් ඉකොනොමි එකක් ගැන මේ රටේ තියෙන හොඳම ඩිජිටල් ආයතනය පිට රටකට ගියාම අපි කොහොමද ඒක සාධාරණීකරණය කරන්නේ මේ ආයතනයේට SLT ආයතනයට තමයි තියෙන්නේ ලංකාවේ ඊටාම බලගරු සංනිවේදන පද්ධතිය මුහුදේ ගොඩබිම සහ අහසේ මේකට කට්ටිය බලාගෙන ඉන්නවා මේක විකුණලා මේකෙන් යම්කිසි දෙයක් ගන්න. ඇත්තට මම මේ ජනාධිපතිතුමාට දොස් කියන්නේ නැහැ. මම ජනාධිපතිතුමාට උපදේශ දෙන කට්ටිය ගැන තමයි ප්‍රවේශම් වෙන්නේ. මේක සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම පිට රටකට විකුණුවයි කියන්නේ මම හිතන්නේ නොවිය ඒක මම හිතන්නේ ජාතික අපරාධ. ශ්‍රී ලංකා ටෙලිකොම් සතු ඉඩම් 500ක් තියෙනවා. කොටුවේ තියෙනවා අක්කර එකමාරක ඉඩමක්. ඊළාට ගාල්ල කොටුව ඇතුලේ අක්කර භාගයක ඉඩමක් තියෙනවා. ඊට අමතරව මහනුවර අනුරාධපුරේ ලංකාව හැම දිස්ත්‍රික්කම ඉතා වටිනා ඉඩම් ගොඩක් තිබෙනවා. මේක ජනතාවට අයිති දෙයක්. මම හැම වෙලේම කියනවා පෞද්ගලිකකරණය කළ යුතුයි. හැබැයි ආණ්ඩුවේ යම් කොටසක් තියාගත යුතුයි. හැබැයි මේ විකිණීම ලැබිය යුතු මුදලට විනිවිදභාවයෙන් කාටවත් නිකන් දෙන විදියට නැතුව ඒ ආකාරයෙන් වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඉදිරියටත් අපි බලාගෙන ඉන්නවා මේ වැඩේ හරියට වෙනවද කියලා. ඒක තමයි වැදගත්ම දේ.
Health sector trade unions have decided to engage in a strike tomorrow commencing from 6:30 a.m. demanding that the DAT allowance be provided to all health sector employees. Expanding on this development, the health trade unions added that more than 100,000 health employees are expected to join in on the strike tomorrow as they ramp up pressure following a seemingly non-committal response by the government of Sri Lanka.
A strike was first launched by members affiliated to 72 health sector trade unions on the 16th of January this year in protest of the government's decision to provide the DAT allowance of 70,000 rupees to government doctors only, demanding the allowance increase for all health sector employees instead. However, the strike was temporarily halted on the grounds that the president would address this issue on his return from an official overseas tour. Things reached a tipping point again yesterday when the health sector trade unions engaged in yet another protest campaign, insisting that the issue pertaining to the debt allowance was yet to be addressed by the president. To ramp up further pressure, the trade unions have decided to launch a strike tomorrow, commencing from 6:30 a.m.
අපි ඊයේ දවසේ ජනාධිපතිවරයාට අපේ දෙවනි ලිපිය ලිව්වා කරුණාකරලා මේ ප්‍රශ්නයට මැදිහත් වෙන්න. ඒ නිසා අපිට වෙන විකල්පයක් ඉතිරි වෙලා නැති හින්දා පෙබරවාරි 1 වෙනිදා උදේ 6:30ට අපි නැවත වතාවක් වර්ජන ක්‍රියාමාර්ගයකට යනවා.
ළමා රෝහල්, වකුගඩු රෝහල්, කාන්තා රෝහල් ඒ වගේ විශේෂිත ඒකක වලින් අපි අපගේ වැඩ වර්ජනය ඉවත් කරලා තියෙනවා. දිවෙන පුරාම ඖෂධ බෙදා හැරීම, ඖෂධ නිකුත් කිරීම ආදී සියලුම කටවලින් අපි ඉවත් වෙනවා.
විකිරණ පරීක්ෂණ MRI CT පරීක්ෂණ ඇතුළු සියලු විකිරණ භාවිතාවෙන් සිදුවන පරීක්ෂණ සහ ප්‍රතිකාර සේවා ඒකම සියලු රසායනාගාර පරීක්ෂණ සේවා ඖෂධ නිකුත් කිරීම සහ බෙදා හැරීම භෞතික චිකිත්සක ප්‍රතිකාර සේවා සහ වෘත්තීය චිකිත්සක ප්‍රතිකාර සේවා කියන සියලු සේවාවන් අඩාල වීමක් මේ පළවෙනිට සිද්ධ වෙනවා.
President's Director General of Trade Unions, Saman Ratnapriya, commented on the strike planned for tomorrow.
ඒ වෘත්තීය සමිති කණ්ඩායම ඒගොල්ලොන් ස්වාධීනව තමයි මේ මොහොත වෙනකොට තීන්දුව ගන්නේ. අපේ සම්බන්ධයක් නැහැ. මොකද අපිට වැඩ වර්ජන ප්‍රොමෝට් කරන්න බෑ. හැබැයි ඒ අයගේ තියෙන ප්‍රශ්නේ අපි අවබෝධ කරගෙන තියෙනවා. ඉතින් ආණ්ඩුව පැත්තෙන් ඒකට අවධානය යොමු වෙමින් තියෙනවා, සාකච්ඡා කරමින් යනවා. වැටුණු රටක ආර්ථිකයේ පැත්තෙන් ඉතාම අමාරු තත්ත්වයක තියෙන නිසා ආණ්ඩුවට වහාම විසඳුමක් දීමේ හැකියාවක් නැති ගැටලුවක් තියෙනවා.
Concurrently, the Government Medical Officers Association presented an open memorandum regarding the strike to all non-medical staff members employed in government health institutions. The open memo asserted the thought that a few trade union leaders operating along narrow political agendas should not be allowed to destroy the dignity of non-medical staff in the health sector. In related news, members of the All Ceylon Nurses Union visited the Malwata Chapter Monastery this morning to discuss the issues in the health sector with the Most Venerable Tibbatuave Sri Siddhartha Sumangala Mahanayaka Thero and handed over a memorandum discussing the problems prevailing in the health sector.
Attorney at law Rajiv Amarasuriya has been appointed to the governing board of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka by President Ranil Wickremesinghe upon the approval of the Constitutional Council. Amarasuriya, who was the former secretary to the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, is renowned for his introduction of innovative and highly successful continuous legal education and professional development programs, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, he also holds various prominent positions such as a member of the Council of the University of Colombo, a board member of the Sri Lanka Accounting and Auditing Standards Board, and is an executive committee member of Lawasia. Amarasuriya also served in roles such as member of the Council of Legal Education of Sri Lanka and Commissioner of the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka. Carrying on the news from yesterday, the new building of the Postgraduate Institute of Pali and Buddhist Studies at the University of Kelaniya was inaugurated today by President Ranil Wickremesinghe. This inauguration took place against a backdrop where the students of the University of Kelaniya had engaged in a 2-day protest campaign against the decision of the university management to invite the president to inaugurate a university building.
A group of students of the University of Kelaniya engaged in a protest in response to a decision made by the university management to invite President Ranil Wickremesinghe to inaugurate a building belonging to the university's Faculty of Graduate Studies. The protest, which later intensified yesterday, was dispersed following the discussions held with the Vice-Chancellor. Despite the protest's launch, President Ranil Wickremesinghe today arrived at the university premises to inaugurate the building of Postgraduate Institute of Pali and Buddhist Studies. There were, however, no protests carried out as a result of the high security deployed at the premises. Following the inauguration of the university building, the president addressed the audience.
2019 මේ ස්ථානට පැමිණලා මේ ගොඩනැගිල්ලේ වැඩ කටයුතු ආරම්භ කරන්න මට මුල්ගල යොදවන්නට කාලේ හම්බුණා. මට ඇවිල්ලා දැන් මේ ගොඩනැගිල්ල විවෘත කරන්න අවස්ථාව හම්බුණා. අපේ ජීවිතයේ තියෙන එක අරගලයයි. ඒ අරගලය ජය ගන්න මාර්ගය තමයි බුදුරජාණන් වහන්සේ දේශනා කළා තියෙන්නේ. එහෙනම් ඒ ධර්මය ගැන අපි මීටත් වඩා අවධානය යොමු කරන්න ඕනේ. තේරවාද බුදුදහම බිහි වුණේ ලංකාවේ. ලෝකෙට ගියේ ලංකාවේ. එහෙනම් ලංකාව තුල මේ ගැන වැඩි අවධානයක් යොමු කරන්න තිබෙනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම තායිලන්තය වගේ රටවල් වල අද විශාල ලෙස පොත්පත් තිබෙනවා. ඉංග්‍රීසි භාෂාවෙන් තිබෙනවා. අපිට ඒ தත්වෙට එන්න තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මම බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ ලංකාවේ මේ වැඩ කටයුතු ඉදිරියට ගෙනියන්න තීරණය කළා තියෙන්නේ පළමුවෙන්ම මහා විහාරයේ කැණුම් කටයුතු කරන්න. ඒ සඳහා දැනට ලුම්බිනියේ කැණුම් කටයුතු කරපු මායාදේවී විහාරස්ථානයේ කැණුම් කටයුතු කරපු ධර්ම විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයයි ඒකේ කනින්හම් මහාචාර්යතුමා එක්ක දැන් අපි ගිවිසුමකට ඇතුල් වෙනවා ඒ වැඩ කටයුතු කරගෙන යන්න. මං හිතන්නේ අවුරුදු 10ක්වත් යයි ඒකේ මූලික වැඩ කටයුතු අවසන් කරන්න.
Meanwhile, following the departure of the president, the university students reinitiated their protest at the Kalaniya University premises.
Now for some good news, welcome back. Tourism Minister Harin Fernando confirmed that today Sri Lanka welcomed over 201,000 tourists as at the 30th of January this year, indicating 100% year-on-year growth. In a media briefing held today, Minister Fernando further said that the sector forecasts about 2.2 million annual tourist arrivals by the end of this year. Commenting on the recent protests, however, that have created public unrest in the country, he observed that it stands to affect the current positive trend in the sector, as international warnings will now be issued to the international community regarding the safety of the country.
අද 106ක සංචාරක වර්ධනයක් තියෙනවා. අද සංචාරක කර්මාන්තයේදී එකක් බැලුවොත් සයි 23 අප්‍රේල් මාසයේ ආවේ 1,02,000යි සංචාරකයෝ. 2,01,683ක් ඊයේ 30 වෙනිදා වෙනකොට බහැලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මම හිතනවා අද 31 අද දවසෙත් තව 7,000ක් විතර එකතු වුණාම 2,08,000 පණින්න 100%කින් වර්ධනයක් ගිය අවුරුද්දටත් වඩා මේ ජනවාරිය තුල ලැබිලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අපි තරුණයෝ මිලියනයකට තරුණ ව්‍යවසායකයෝ කරන්න වැඩසටහනකුත් ඉදිරිපත් කරනවා. අපි ගත්තොත් එහෙම ටුවරිසම් ඉන්ඩස්ට්‍රි එක බැලුවොත් හෝම් ස්ටේස් කියලා තියෙනවනේ. දැන් අපේ ඇත්තට ලංකාවේ තියෙන කාමර අඩුයි. හැබැයි 1 මිලියන් දුන්නොත් රුපියල් 10,000ක් දුන්නොත් අපි මේ සංචාරක කලාප ලංකාවේ දැන් 49ක් වෙනක 64 දක්වා වැඩි වෙනවා. අපි ඒ වගේම ලංකාව ඇතුලේ ගුවන් සේවා දෙකක් ඇත්තටම ආරම්භ කිරීමට සියලු කටයුතු සූදානම් කරගෙන මට ලොකු විශ්වාසයක් තියෙනවා. තව මාසයක් ඇතුළත ඒ කටයුතු කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙයි කියලා. ඒ අතරතුරේදී අර සෙට් එකක් ඇවිල්ලා කඳුළු ගෑස් ගහගෙන ගෙදර යනවා. මේ වගේක් කරපු ගමන් මෙහි ඉන්න තානාපති කාර්යාලය වලින් ගහන වෝනින් එකක් civil unrest in the country caution කියලා ගහනවා. ගහපු ගමන් travel ඇඩ්වයිසරියක් වදිනවා. සුවහාල හිතනද මේ මිලියන ගාණක් කළා කරන්නේ මේ ආණ්ඩුව පෙරලන්න ආවේ කියලා. ඒ කරේ අර ජාත්‍යන්තරයට කියලා අපිව වට්ටලා එන සංචාරකයෝ අඩු කරගන්න. ඉතින් එහෙම වුණාම කොහොමද කොළඹ සංචාරකයෝ නෑ අඩුයි. කොළඹ ඉන්නේ බිස්නස් ලෙෂර් ටුවරිස්ලා හරි අඩුයි. හැබැයි ඒ එන ටුවරිස් කෙනෙක් වුණත් මේවා දැක්කම හිතනවා මේ රටේ ඇත්තටම අරුබුදයක් තියෙනවා.
What are your projections for the tourism industry in 2024? What are your arrival targets, revenue targets, and also what are your key source markets? Because now we have the visa-free arrival situation, but that's going to wrap up from March. Do you hope to extend it?
I hope I can convince the cabinet to extend it because I actually see a massive benefit out of the free visa. Our targets for 2024 is about 2.2 million. Sri Lanka tourist promotion putting out a lot of money this year on a global campaign which was not done for 15 years. So I think if all goes well, we will have one of the record years. And our target for 2030 is 4 million. So my ultimate target is to get to 4 million. We have officially SAR category about 50,000 rooms. Informal sector, there is homestays, guest houses, another 40,000, about 90,000 rooms. My ambitious target for 2024 would be 4 billion.
Sri Lanka's headline inflation measured by the Colombo Consumer Price Index increased this month to 6.4% from 4% in December. The Department of Census and Statistics said the year-on-year inflation of the food group increased to 3.3% from 0.3% in December, while the year-on-year inflation in the non-food group increased to 7.9% in January from 5.8% in December.
According to the Department of Census and Statistics, headline inflation as measured by the Colombo Consumer Price Index on a year-on-year basis increased to 6.4% in January this year from 4% in December. Year-on-year inflation of the food group increased to 3.3% from 0.3% in December, while the year-on-year inflation in the non-food group increased to 7.9% in January from 5.8% in December. The contribution of inflation by food commodities on year-on-year basis was 1.1% in January. The contribution of non-food items was 5.31%, mainly due to price increases in the housing, water, electricity, gas and other fuels group with a contribution of 4.25%. education 0.39%, alcoholic beverages, tobacco and narcotics 0.3%, and clothing and footwear 0.19%.
The Colombo Stock Exchange closed today, boosted by gains in financials and communication services stocks. The CSE All Share Index closed 0.06% higher at 10,311.15 points, while the S&P SL20 edged 0.0% lower to close at 2,896.48 points. Telecom PLC and Distilleries Company of Sri Lanka PLC were the top gainers on the index, gaining 4.4% and 3.1% respectively. Trading volume on the CSE All Share Index fell to 29.8 million shares from 45.9 million shares in the previous session. Equity market turnover fell to 695.8 million rupees from 1.07 billion rupees as the banking sector was the top contributor today, while the diversified financial sector was the second highest contributor. Foreign investors were net sellers, offloading stocks worth 225.3 million rupees, while domestic investors were net buyers, purchasing shares worth 643.8 million rupees. With that, let's take a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies as the day progressed. The Industrial Development Board of Ceylon signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the Federation of Information Technology Limited recently, while John Keel's Properties partnered with NDB to provide aspiring homeowners attractive mortgage packages to invest in their dream homes at Viman, Jayala. With that, here's a look at more corporate news in brief. The Industrial Development Board of Ceylon entered into a Memorandum of Understanding with the Federation of Information Technology Limited recently on expanding IDB activities into the ICT industry. Accordingly, this MOU will enable the IDB to digitally transform these industries, enabling them to contribute to the government's digital economy initiative. Further, the collaboration between IDB and FITIS will pave the way to reach overseas markets for SMEs and FITIS members under ICT as an industry section, as it is seen as a priority objective for IDB. In the meantime, John Keel's Properties partnered with NDB to provide aspiring homeowners attractive mortgage packages to invest in their dream homes at Viman, Jayala. The innovative and flexible mortgage solutions offered by NDB will enable prospective homeowners to access financing plans that match their financial capabilities and ownership goals. Additionally, these packages are designed to empower home buyers to purchase an apartment at Viman swiftly and seamlessly. In other news, the 36th Annual General Meeting of the Sri Lanka Insurance Brokers Association took place at Ramada in Colombo 3. During the recently held event, the association further elected a new committee for 2024-2025. Accordingly, the recently appointed council stands as a testament to SLIBA's dedication to fostering a community of proficient and ethical insurance brokers. We now have Udishan join us from Capital Alliance with some thoughts on the current status of the economy of the country. In our next segment, Sri Lanka's economic outlook.
In economic news this week, we saw the 3-month Treasury bill rates fall by 138 basis points to 11.97%, while the 12-month Treasury bill rates fell by 78 basis points to 12%. As expected during the last few weeks, we have seen the short-term rates falling faster than the long-term rates, and this is owing to the government reducing its borrowing requirement in terms of the shorter-term funds, with the increasing tax collections coming into play. However, from a borrowing cost perspective, the average weighted prime lending rate increased by 47 basis points to 12.25%, which is an uptick that we've seen compared to the previous 4 weeks where there's been continuous reduction in terms of the borrowing rates. Going into the next couple of weeks, we feel that the short-term interest rates or Treasury bill rates could even fall further. From a currency perspective, the currency appreciated further during the week, where the currency appreciated from 320 rupees to the dollar to 317 rupees to the dollar, and the improvement in the currency was as a result of improved tourism collections, reduced import of fuel bill with increased increased rainfall, lower demand for overall imports as a result of consumer slowdown with the increase in terms of VAT, and also the banks reducing the dollar purchases for their net open positions, which happened during the month of December. Going into the next few months, we feel that the currency appreciation will be temporary, and once import demand kicks in with economic recovery coming into play, we expect by the second quarter for the currency to start depreciating. Also from a fiscal perspective, the government made a primary surplus of 330 billion rupees by the end of November, which is a substantial increase compared to the previous years. And also going into the month of December, we feel with the capex spending coming into play, the primary surplus will reduce towards the 50 billion rupee mark.
Minister of Sports and Tourism Harin Fernando says that Sri Lanka plans to host the annual general meeting of the International Cricket Council in the coming months after successfully lifting the ban imposed on Sri Lanka cricket. Addressing a media briefing today, Minister Fernando further said that the President, during his discussions with the ICC Chief Executive Officer during his visit in Sri Lanka, promised to amend the Sports Act, removing the powers vested in the Sports Minister, indicating the measures taken to lessen political interference in the sports sector of the country.
ICC AGM එකෙන් ලොකු ඉවෙන්ට් එකක් ලෝකේ තියෙන සියලුම ක්‍රිකට් පරිපාලන සියලු දෙනා ජූනි මාසේ ලංකාවට ගෙන ක්‍රිකට් පරිපාලනයේ ඡන්ද කරන ක්‍රමය වෙනස් වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒ වගේම ෆුට්බෝල් ෆෙඩරේෂන් එක. ඒකේ ආසියානු සභාපතිතුමා මං ගිය සතියේ මුණ ගැවුණා. අපිට ක්‍රීඩාංගණයක් අපි කටාන ප්‍රදේශයේ ජාත්‍යන්තර ක්‍රීඩාංගණයට එතුමා මුල්ගල් තියන්නට පැමිණෙන්න සූදානමින් ඉන්නවා අප්‍රේල් මාසයේදී. ඒ වගේම ලංකාවේ තියෙන මේ ස්ටේඩියම් විනාශ වෙලා තියෙනවා. අපි අද පත්තරයට EOI එකක් දැම්ම එක්ස්ප්‍රෙෂන් ඔෆ් ඉන්ට්‍රෙස්ට් එකක්. පෞද්ගලිකාංශයටත් එකතු වෙලා රජයත් එකතු වෙලා ක්‍රීඩකයන්ටත් ඒව පාවිච්චි කරන් දෙනවා වගේම ඒවා ඒ හොඳ තත්වෙම පවත්වාගෙන යන්න වැඩපිළිවෙලක් නිර්මාණය කරනවා. ඉන්දියාවේ ක්‍රිකට් සභාපතිගෙන් ඉල්ලීමක් කරා IPL තරඟ දෙකක් හෝ තුනක් ලංකාවට උදව්වක් විදියට ලබා දෙන්න කියලා මේ IPL එඩිෂන් එකේ. මොකද ඉන්දියාවේ ඡන්දයක් තියෙන නිසා ඔවුන් ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් දැඩිසේ සලකා බලනවා කියලා මට ඊමේල් පණිවිඩයක් එවලා තිබුණා. එහෙම වුණා නම් අපි බලාපොරොත්තුව මත්තල ගුවන්තොටුපළට දකුණු ඉන්දියාවෙන් මැච් වලට මිනිස්සු ගෙන්නලා අපේ සූරියව ක්‍රීඩාංගණයේ තරඟ කීපයක් පවත්වන්න පුළුවන්ද කියන එක ජනාධිපතිතුමා පැහැදිලිව කිව්වා. ක්‍රීඩා පනත ඇතුලේ ක්‍රීඩා ඇමතිවරයාගේ තියෙන බලතල ගලවනවා කියලා. හොඳයි. ක්‍රීඩා වෙන මොන ලෝකෙ කිසිම රටක් නැහැ ක්‍රීඩා ඇමති විසින් ටීම් අත්සන් කරනවා. මේ දේශපාලනයේ වීමක් ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම. ඒ ICC ගේ ප්‍රධාන දායක නිලධාරීතුමා ආපු වෙලාවේ යා කිව්වා ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ ටෙක්නිකල් සපෝට් එක දෙන්නම් ශ්‍රී ලංකා ක්‍රිකට් එකට. ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ කොන්ස්ටිටියුෂන් එකක් හදන්න. ඒක අපිට බාර දුන්නාම අපි චිත්‍රසිරි කොමිටුවට ඒක බාර දෙනවා. පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඉදිරිපත් කළා 50ක් විදිහට පාස් කරන්න. මීට වඩා බරපතලම දේ ක්‍රිකට්. ක්‍රිකට් වල අපේ හරි ඒ ටීම් එකක් සංවිධානයක් නැහැ. අපේ ඩෙවලොප්මන්ට් ස්ක්වොඩ් එකක් නැහැ. අපි ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම ලොකු විශාල මුදලක් පිටරට කෝචස්ලට ගෙවනවා. ඒගොල්ලන්ට KPI එකක් නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලන්ට දිනුම පෙරදුම අනුව ගෙවීමක් කරන්න ඕනේ. ක්‍රීඩකයන්ට මම අලුතෙන් නීතියක් ගෙනලා තියෙනවා. මොනම විදියකින්වත් රට නියෝජනය කරලා යන ක්‍රීඩකයෙක්ට ලංකාව ගැන හැඟීම දෙන දවසක පුහුණුව නැතුව ලංකාවෙන් පිටට යන්න බෑ කියලා.
දැන් අපි දන්නවා ක්‍රිකට් සංගමේ සංගම් තියෙන 100 ගාණක්. මේක අඩු කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා
වැඩි දෙනෙක්ගේ එකඟතාවය ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා 60 ගානකට බස්සන්න. දැන් ඉන්න ක්‍රිකට් පරිපාලනයත් ඒකට සුබවාදී ප්‍රතිචාර තියෙනවා.
That's my news for the evening. I'm Jonathan Benedict. Have a blessed Thursday ahead. Good night.